The hangar at Orion Station was always quiet at night. The repair crews had gone home hours ago, leaving the air filled with only the faint hum of power lines and the occasional drip of coolant from the ceiling. Daniel Cole, a human mechanic, was sitting on a metal crate, finishing his late dinner from a small food box. He liked working nights, fewer people, fewer orders, and more time to think. He was chewing the last bite when he heard it, a voice, soft and almost shaking. "May I take your leftovers?" "Sir." The words made him freeze, fork halfway to his mouth. They weren't just polite, they were desperate. Slowly, Daniel turned his head. Standing a few meters away, half hidden behind the shadow of a cargo hauler, was a dragon, not the giant kind from the old fantasy tales, but a real alien dragon, tall, slender, with smooth dark scales that shimmered faintly in the dim light. Its wings were folded close to its back, and its golden eyes watched him with an expression Daniel couldn't name. The dragon's head was lowered, almost as if afraid. Daniel's first thought was, "This is trouble." Station rules were clear. Non-registered alien species were not allowed in work areas without clearance, and dragons, especially the wandering kind, were treated with suspicion. He'd heard the stories. They were dangerous, temperamental, and quick to anger, but this one didn't look dangerous. It looked tired, hungry, and something else. Something Daniel saw in its eyes that made him hesitate. He looked down at his food box, just a bit of rice, some cooked vegetables, and one piece of meat left, hardly enough for himself, let alone a creature that size. "Why?" Daniel asked, his voice calm but curious. The dragon blinked slowly, as if surprised he had spoken at all. Its voice was quiet, but the words carried a weight that made Daniel's chest tighten. "I have not eaten in 2 days." Daniel glanced around the empty hangar. If anyone saw this, he could lose his job, but something in him refused to turn the dragon away. Without another word, he slid the food box toward the creature. The dragon stepped forward, moving with careful grace, as if every step hurt. When it reached him, it knelt, actually knelt, before taking the box in its clawed hands. It didn't eat right away. Instead, it looked at Daniel again, holding his gaze for several long seconds. Then it whispered, "Thank you," and began to eat slowly, almost ritualistically. Daniel found himself watching. The dragon ate every bite, not wasting a single grain of rice. When it finished, it placed the empty box back on the crate and bowed its head low. "You should not be here," Daniel said quietly. The dragon gave a small nod. "I know," it replied, "but I had no choice." There was something in its tone, a shadow of pain and fear. Daniel wanted to ask questions, but the sound of distant footsteps echoed through the hangar, heavy boots on metal. Someone was coming. The dragon's eyes widened. Without another word, it slipped back into the shadows, moving silently between stacks of crates until it was gone. Daniel sat frozen, unsure if what had just happened was real or a trick of his tired mind. The footsteps passed by the hangar door without stopping. The danger was gone, but so was the dragon. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the scars he had seen along the dragon's arms, faint but clear, long, thin lines, the kind left by restraints. He had repaired enough damaged machinery to recognize wear and damage. Those scars were not from battle, they were from captivity. The next day, he told himself it was none of his business. He told himself the station had rules for a reason, but deep down, he knew that if the dragon appeared again, he wouldn't turn it away. Part of him hoped he wouldn't see it, another part hoped he would. That evening, as the artificial night cycle began, Daniel returned to the hangar. He was checking a power conduit when he heard it again, the same voice, soft but steady this time. "I do not need food today," the dragon said, stepping out from the shadows. Daniel turned, surprised. "What do you need then?" he asked. The dragon's golden eyes met his, and there was a flicker of something. "Trust, maybe, or desperation." "I need you to fix something," it said. Daniel's heart sank. He had a feeling that whatever came next would pull him far beyond station rules and into a story that could change everything. Daniel stared at the dragon, unsure if he had heard right. The hangar lights flickered, casting long shadows across the metal floor. He set down his tools slowly. "What do you want me to fix?" he asked, his voice low. The dragon stepped closer, its claws clicking softly against the steel. "My ship," it said simply. "It is hidden." Daniel frowned. A hidden ship meant trouble. Big trouble. If station security found out, both of them could end up in holding cells. But the dragon's eyes never left his. They were calm but carried a weight of urgency. Daniel sighed and grabbed his repair kit. Show me, he said. The dragon led him through the maintenance tunnels. They moved in silence, the air growing colder the deeper they went. Eventually, they reached a locked blast door. Its surface scratched and rusted. The dragon placed its hand against a small panel and murmured something in a language Daniel didn't know. With a low groan, the door slid open. Inside was darkness, broken only by the faint glint of metal. Daniel stepped in, his eyes adjusted, and his breath caught. It wasn't just a ship. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. The hull was smooth and curved, covered in faded markings that looked older than human history. Several panels were missing, wires hung loose, and the engine housing was half open. This is ancient, Daniel whispered. Dragon gave a small nod. It is my family's. Daniel circled the ship, his mind racing. He had heard stories about old world ships, relics from before the current galactic age, but to see one up close, and broken, was like finding treasure buried under 1,000 years of dust. What happened to it? He asked. The dragon's wings twitched, and for the first time, Daniel saw the pain in its expression. I was taken, it said. They tried to make me a weapon. Daniel's gaze dropped to the scars on the dragon's arms. He didn't need to ask who they were. The Empire had a reputation for enslaving those with rare abilities. Can you fix it? The dragon asked, its voice steady but hopeful. Daniel ran his hands over the exposed engine core, feeling the cold metal. It's going to take time, he said, and parts one can't get without raising suspicion. The dragon tilted its head. Then we will be quick, it said. Before Daniel could answer, a sudden sound echoed through the tunnel, a distant metallic clang, followed by footsteps. The dragon's eyes narrowed. They have found me. Daniel's heart pounded. Who? He whispered. The dragon didn't answer. Instead, it moved to the ship's entrance, motioning for Daniel to follow. They will not stop until I am gone, the dragon said, its voice low but filled with iron. And if they see you with me, you will be hunted too. The footsteps grew louder. A sharp beam of light swept across the blast door. Daniel could hear muffled voices, deep, alien tones mixed with the metallic clicks of boots on steel. He swallowed hard. He could walk away now, go back to his safe job, pretend this never happened, or he could stay, and step into a danger that might never let him go. The dragon looked at him, golden eyes unblinking. Choose, it said, and in that moment, Daniel realized, his life was already changing, whether he wanted it to or not. The voices outside the blast door grew sharper. Daniel could hear the hiss of pressurized weapons being armed. The dragon moved fast, pulling a small lever near the ship's ramp, sealing the entrance with a dull thud. They will break through in seconds, it said, its voice tight but controlled. Daniel's hands tightened on his repair kit. How do we get out? He asked. The dragon's eyes flicked toward a narrow maintenance shaft at the side of the bay. Without waiting for permission, it pushed Daniel toward it. Go, it ordered. Daniel crawled inside, the cold metal pressing against his arms as the dragon followed, folding its wings tight to fit. Behind them, the heavy blast door slammed open with a deafening crash. Harsh white light filled the bay, and a voice barked something in a language Daniel couldn't understand. Then came the sound of boots, many boots, pounding on the steel. Daniel and the dragon moved as quickly as the cramped space allowed, the shaft vibrating with every distant explosion of footsteps. Above them, pipes hissed with steam, and somewhere nearby, a vent fan hummed with a slow, almost mocking rhythm. This way leads to the docking ring, Daniel whispered. The dragon nodded. They will expect that, it said. We go down instead. Without warning, the dragon kicked out a panel below them, and they dropped into a dimly lit cargo conduit. Daniel hit the ground hard, but the dragon landed like a shadow, silent and poised. The air smelled of oil and rust. Rows of cargo containers stretched into the distance, each marked with faded trade symbols. Somewhere to the left, Daniel heard the unmistakable sound of scanners, the high-pitched sweep of bounty trackers searching for life signs. They're tracking you, Daniel said under his breath. The dragon's gaze hardened. They are tracking my blood, it replied. Daniel didn't have time to ask what that meant, because at that moment, the far end of the conduit erupted in sparks as a group of armored figures stormed in. Their armor gleamed under the dim lights, each carrying a rifle-like weapon with a faint blue glow. Run, the dragon said. Daniel didn't need to be told twice. They sprinted between containers, weaving through narrow gaps as blue plasma bolts hissed past them, scorching the walls. One shot hit a cargo crate beside Daniel, sending shards of metal into the air. He coughed, his lungs Burning from the acrid smoke, the dragon grabbed his arm and yanked him into a side tunnel just as another blast shook the floor. The tunnel twisted and dropped steeply, forcing them to half slide, half run. Daniel's heart pounded so hard it felt like it would break through his chest. He could hear the armored pursuers behind them, fast, relentless, and closing in. "We won't outrun them forever," Daniel gasped. The dragon didn't answer, but its eyes glowed faintly in the dark. It raised one clawed hand and pressed it to the wall. The metal under its palm began to shimmer, warping like liquid. A section of the tunnel wall simply melted away, revealing a hidden passage. Daniel stared. "You can do that?" he asked, stunned. The dragon's voice was low, urgent. "I was not meant to be a prisoner," it said. "I was meant to be a king." Before Daniel could react, they slipped inside the passage and the wall sealed itself behind them. The noise of the chase faded, replaced by the deep silence of the hidden route. Daniel felt a chill crawl up his spine. He realized that whatever he had stepped into was far bigger than he had imagined, and somewhere deep inside, he knew, this was only the beginning. The hidden passage was narrow and cold, the metal walls curved around them like the inside of a great machine. Daniel's footsteps echoed softly, while the dragon moved almost silently, each step measured and controlled. They had been walking for several minutes when Daniel finally spoke. "Back there, you melted the wall," he said quietly. "How?" The dragon didn't look at him. Instead, it kept its gaze forward, golden eyes glinting in the dim light. "It is part of who I am," it said. "My blood carries an old power, one the Empire fears." Daniel frowned. "Who are you really?" he asked. The dragon finally stopped, turning to face him. In the flickering light, Daniel could see the fine details of its scales, each one edged with a faint glow, like molten metal cooling after fire. "My name is Zareth," the dragon said slowly. "I am the last son of the Draken Sovereign." The name hit Daniel like a shock. He had heard it before, whispered in old spacer legends. The Draken Sovereign had ruled a vast kingdom long before the Galactic Empire rose, but that kingdom had fallen in a brutal war, its rulers wiped out, its survivors hunted. "You're supposed to be dead," Daniel said. Zareth's gaze didn't waver. "I was supposed to be," it replied. "But the Empire wanted my power more than my death." Daniel's eyes fell to the scars on Zareth's arms. "They tried to control you," he murmured. "They did more than try," Zareth said, voice low. "They kept me in chains, made me fight for them, drained my strength until I could no longer resist." He looked away for a moment, and Daniel saw something rare. Not just pain, but shame. "I escaped only because they thought I was too weak to matter anymore." Daniel shook his head slowly. "And now they found you," he said. Zareth's wings shifted slightly, the faint sound of scales brushing together. "They will not stop," he said. "They will earn entire stations to find me." Daniel felt a cold weight settle in his chest. If that was true, then helping Zareth wasn't just dangerous, it was suicidal. But something in him refused to back down. "You came to me for a reason," Daniel said. Zareth's eyes softened. "You were the only one who looked at me without fear." Before Daniel could reply, the passage trembled. Low, deep rumble echoed through the walls, followed by the faint sound of metal groaning under pressure. Zareth's expression darkened. "They have found the outer tunnel," he said. "They are cutting through." Daniel's heart kicked into overdrive. "What do we do?" he asked. Zareth stepped closer, placing a clawed hand on Daniel's shoulder. "We reach my ship," he said. "And if we cannot, then I will give them something they will never forget." The rumble grew louder. Somewhere behind them, the sound of cutting lasers slicing through steel filled the air. Daniel grabbed his kit tighter. He had stepped into this mess thinking he could help fix a broken engine. Now he realized he was standing beside the heir to a lost throne, and the target of an empire's wrath. As they ran deeper into the hidden path, Zareth's voice was low but steady. "Daniel," he said, "if we do not make it out, remember this. The day you gave me food was the day you became part of my clan." Daniel didn't know what that meant, but he could feel the weight of it, and as the tunnel opened into a dark chamber filled with strange, ancient machinery, he knew that whatever happened next would decide both their fates. The dark chamber stretched high above them, its walls lined with strange machinery that looked older than the station itself. Dim blue lights pulsed along the floor, guiding their steps toward a raised platform in the center. In the middle of that platform rested the dragon's ship, the same ancient vessel Daniel had seen before up close. It was even more impressive. its hull marked with strange runes that seemed to glow faintly when Zareth approached. Daniel moved quickly to the engine housing. His mechanic's mind already mapping out what needed to be done. Several key systems were missing, wires were cut, and the fuel intake was clogged with something he didn't recognize. This will take hours, Daniel muttered. Zareth's gaze was sharp. You have minutes, he said. They are already in the outer corridor. Daniel looked up, frustration building. I can't fix this with what I have here, he said. I need parts from the main maintenance bay, and that's on the other side of the station. Zareth stepped closer, his golden eyes burning with intensity. If I give you what you need, will you take the risk? Daniel hesitated. What do you mean? He asked. Zareth reached into a compartment on the ship and pulled out a small, black cube. It hummed softly, and Daniel could feel the vibration in his bones. This is a core key, Zareth said. It will open any Imperial lock, any door, any storage vault. But once you use it, they will know. Daniel stared at the cube. Using it meant he could get what he needed in seconds, but it also meant the Empire would track him instantly. It wasn't just his job at risk now. It was his life. Zareth didn't move, waiting for his answer. Finally, Daniel took the cube. I'll get your parts, he said, but when I come back, you'd better be ready to fly. Zareth gave a short nod. And you, he said, be ready to run. Daniel turned toward the hidden tunnel that led back toward the station's main levels. The sound of distant pounding echoed through the chamber. The Empire's forces were getting closer. He glanced back at Zareth, who was now standing guard at the ship's ramp, claws flexing, eyes fixed on the dark passage ahead. There was no fear in the dragon's stance, only a quiet, burning resolve. As Daniel slipped into the tunnel, the air seemed heavier. He could feel the cube in his pocket, almost alive. Every step brought him closer to the line between survival and death, and deep inside, he knew that once he crossed it, there would be no going back. Daniel burst back into the ancient chamber, breathless. His hands were full of parts scavenged from the maintenance bay, his jacket scorched from a near hit by an Imperial patrol. Zareth was waiting at the ship's ramp, tail lashing with restless energy. They are close, the dragon said sharply. They will be here in less than a minute. Daniel didn't waste time. He dropped to his knees by the engine housing, connecting wires and sealing the fuel intake. The ancient metal hummed beneath his touch, almost as if the ship recognized the repairs. Zareth moved to the controls inside, his voice steady but tense. When you finish, get inside. Do not stop for anything. The pounding of armored boots echoed down the tunnel. Daniel's hands flew faster, every connection sparking with urgency. Suddenly, the chamber lit up with bright blue plasma fire as Imperial soldiers flooded in. Weapons raised, Zareth roared, his voice shaking the air, and a shimmering wall of heat appeared between them and the soldiers. The air shimmered like the surface of a desert mirage, and the bolts of plasma hissed harmlessly against it. Now, Zareth called. Daniel slammed the last panel shut and sprinted up the ramp. The ship's interior was unlike anything he had ever seen. Smooth surfaces, glowing symbols, controls that seemed to respond to touch before he even pressed them. Zareth took the pilot's seat but looked at Daniel with a strange intensity. You will fly, he said. Daniel froze. What? This ship knows its pilot, Zareth said quickly. It chose you the moment you touched it in the hangar. Daniel didn't have time to argue. The wall of heat behind them was flickering, the soldiers pushing through. He dropped into the seat, his hands instinctively finding the controls. The ship's systems lit up in a cascade of blue light, and the engines roared to life. The vessel lifted off the platform just as the first soldier breached the ramp. Zareth's tail whipped out, knocking the intruder back. As Daniel punched the thrusters, the ship shot forward, smashing through the far wall of the chamber, revealing the cold, endless black of space. But they didn't escape into safety. Ahead of them, an Imperial blockade hung in orbit, massive warships bristling with weapons, forming an unbreakable wall between them and freedom. Break formation. An Imperial voice barked over comms. Target the vessel. Do not let it pass. Zareth's claws gripped the edge of Daniel's seat. Push her, he said, his voice low but fierce. Daniel's hands moved over the controls, pulling the ship into a steep dive toward the edge of the blockade. Plasma bolts lit up the void around them, close enough to burn the hull. Zareth closed his eyes and raised his claws. A golden shield burst around the ship, deflecting incoming fire like rain against glass. They'll overwhelm us, Daniel shouted. Not if you fly like you mean it, Zareth growled. Daniel gritted his teeth. weaving between the largest enemy cruisers, using their massive hulls as cover. The ancient ship responded like it had been waiting for this moment, twisting, rolling, accelerating far beyond what Daniel thought possible. An opening appeared, a narrow gap between two destroyers. Go! Zareth shouted. Danny L slammed the throttle forward, and the ship became a streak of light, slipping through the gap just as the destroyers fired at each other by mistake. They broke free of the blockade, the stars stretching around them as Daniel engaged the jump drive. For a brief, breathless moment, silence filled the cockpit. Then Zareth spoke, his voice steady but heavy with meaning. We are not safe yet, he said, but tonight, the Empire learned fear again. The jump ended with a sharp hum. The stars outside shifted into a view Daniel had never seen before, a vast expanse of deep space, scattered with glowing nebulae and drifting fragments of ancient structures. It was quiet here, almost too quiet. Daniel's hands were still gripping the controls, his heart pounding from the escape. Zareth rose from his seat, his wings stretching slightly in the low light of the cockpit. This is the Ashen Reach, Zareth said, his voice calm but edged with something deeper. My people hid here long ago. Daniel glanced at him. I thought they were gone, he said. Zareth's golden eyes locked with his. They are. Almost. The ship descended toward a hidden station, its surface covered in jagged metal and faded banners that fluttered faintly in the void. As they docked, a group of figures emerged, dragons, smaller than Zareth, but with the same proud posture. They watched Daniel with guarded curiosity. When Zareth stepped out, the dragons bowed their heads, a ripple of silent respect passing through them. One of them, an elder with silver-edged scales, spoke in a deep, resonant voice. You return with a human? Zareth nodded. This human fed me when I had nothing, he said. The elder's eyes widened slightly. You gave him food? Daniel asked, confused. Zareth turned to him. In my culture, sharing food with a stranger is not simple kindness, he said. It is a bond, a pledge of loyalty, forged in trust. Daniel blinked. You mean, when I gave you my leftovers, you became my clan brother, Zareth finished. And by our law, you are owed the same protection and honor as any royal. Before Daniel could respond, alarms blared across the station. A voice rang out over the comms. Imperial scout ships in the sector. The other dragons moved quickly, preparing defenses. Zareth stepped closer to Daniel, his tone firm but not unkind. You can leave, take this moment as your escape, he said, or you can stay and fight beside me. Daniel didn't hesitate. I'm not running, he said. Zareth's eyes softened, and for the first time, a small smile touched his face. Then the Empire will learn, he said quietly, that humans do not give food without giving their word. The station's outer cannons roared to life, streaks of light cutting across the darkness as Imperial scouts closed in. Daniel took the co-pilot seat, the hum of the ship's engines vibrating through his bones. Zareth glanced at him. Ready, clan brother? Daniel nodded. Let's make them regret coming here. As the ship launched back into the black, the stars seemed sharper, the void alive with the pulse of battle. And somewhere deep inside, Daniel knew the truth. The night he shared his food, he hadn't just saved a starving stranger, he had changed the fate of a prince. He had ignited a war the Empire would never forget, and he had found a place where he truly belonged.